We are on a series of messages at Pansy Chapel from which book of the Bible? Well done. We've been asking some questions. What was the first question that we asked? Who is God? Who is the Lord? Specifically, who is this Yahweh that we come here to worship and learn about, right? We asked that question. What was the next question we asked? What does a relationship with Him look like, right? And then we got into this thing about, there's actually 12 things that I noticed in the book of Psalms that talk regarding discouragement and depression. And we actually noticed 12 different things, and that took us 2 sermons to get through that whole bit. And now here we are in Psalms part 5. And today is going to be a morning of declaration. You probably want to grab your Bibles. You can already open them to Deuteronomy 23 because I'm going to get there in a second. But I want to say today is going to be, it's a sermon of declaration. Okay? What is a declaration? Is you might have heard people say something like, on this day, starting right now, from here on, I am openly declaring that I will, and then you fill in the blank, right? Are you with me? Is that a declaration? What's another word for a declaration? Vow. Exactly right. Today is the day. This is what I'm going to do. I'm promising to do it from here on, right? I am declaring. Today is the day. And so, why would anybody... have you ever heard of anybody renewing their vows? Yeah? This happens, right? For marriage. In marriage, this sometimes happens. And just for an example, this morning, if you're following along in the daily Bible reading, we're reading about Queen Esther. And so this morning, I come over to Sheila and I said, Sheila, you're just like Queen Esther to me. It was quiet. She was wondering, where is this going? And I said, you please me, and so you can ask me for whatever you wish. You can have up to half of the kingdom. She says she has the whole kingdom ready, so whatever. But I was trying in a really weird and corny way to, whatever, tell her that I love her. She already knows that. I told her that a long time ago, but I keep on telling her those things, right? It's a way of renewing your vows. But vows are not something to be taken lightly, especially not vows to the Lord. And I just want to read Deuteronomy 23. Ecclesiastes says something very, very similar, but I'm going to read from Deuteronomy 23, 21 to 23. It says, if you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not be slow to pay it, for the Lord your God will certainly demand it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from making a vow, you will not be guilty. Whatever your lips utter, you must be sure to do, because you made your vow freely to the Lord your God with your mouth. Okay? So that in mind, I want you to just keep your finger if you want, because at the end of this sermon, I'm actually going to invite you guys to say a vow to the Lord with me. But this is a warning, okay? Don't make that vow flippantly to the Lord. He takes it pretty serious, okay? So, keep your finger there, and I want to keep on going here for a bit. If God takes vows that seriously, why would we ever make a vow either before Him at like a wedding, or why would we ever make a vow to Him? Why would we ever do it? Because the risk is high. The risk is that if we don't fulfill it, God's going to hold it against us as sin. So why would we ever do that in the first place? The reward's high. Yeah, that's exactly right. Talk some more about that. What's the reward? Relationship. Yeah, there's love there, right? 21 years ago, and when I stood up and declared that from this day forward, I was going to love Sheila for the rest of my life, that is a vow that I made before the Lord. Why? Because I love her, there's a relationship there, and I am willing to make a commitment, right? That's what it is. So how does that look like between you and the Lord? Could you ever get to a point where you said, you know what? I will serve you, love you, whatever, fill in the blank, Lord, because I love you. Could you ever get to that place? I would like to think so, right? If you have a relationship with the Lord, and you understand who he is, you can look at who he is. That's the first question we ask. Who is he? And understanding that, you can actually get to a place where you're willing to make a vow. But I'm going to paraphrase a psalm, but I'm going to paraphrase it into a renewing of the vow that a husband and wife could make to each other, okay? So if you need to imagine somebody, you can imagine Sheila and I renewing our vows. And if you're going to imagine, then we may as well be on a beach in Mexico renewing our vows. And if you need to help us along that way, you're welcome to it. And of course, you're all invited. So I'm going to paraphrase a vow, and if you're really familiar with the Psalms, you might understand which psalm I'm paraphrasing here, but we're only going to look at one fairly short psalm today. But I'm going to first paraphrase it kind of very loosely about what it would look like in a marriage. Okay? And I'm going to paraphrase it two ways. I'm going to paraphrase it in two ways, and I'll ask you if you see the difference, okay? You will. I'll paraphrase it two ways. So the first way is this. Suppose Sheila and I stand up front here, and I say, today I commit to the following. I will speak positively to you and about you to others as long as I live. I will be committed only to you as long as I live. I will keep my eyes unto you alone, and I promise to stay away from situations that might even tempt my eyes to wander. If I hear other husbands talking poorly about their wives, I will rebuke them on the spot. And when I need advice for our marriage, I will look to people who have been married for many years, some even in our congregation. And I will make it my daily task to look for ways to keep our marriage enjoyable and good. Okay? That was one version of the vow. That's a paraphrase of the psalm. Now let me paraphrase it in a way that's different. Suppose I'm standing here and I say to Sheila, I hold her hands and we're looking longingly into each other's eyes, and I say, starting this day today, going forward, as long as you continue to make me happy, I will speak positively about you to others. Okay? I will be committed to you as long as you are committed to me. I will keep my eyes unto you alone, unless you begin to bore me, then I'm off the hook. As long as you keep making our love exciting, I promise to stay away from any situations that might even tempt my eyes to wander. And if I ever hear other husbands talking poorly about their wives, I will rebuke them on the spot, unless I think they have a point, and then I might join them. When I need advice for our marriage, I will look to a variety of men, some from our church, maybe some from Hollywood, and if you put effort into our marriage, I will too. How's that for a vow? What's one word that would describe that? Terrible, conditional, yeah, weak. Right? What's the problem with it? It's conditional. I heard that word. That's a problem with it. It's selfish. The condition is actually based on what? Yeah, but not even, yeah, exactly right. The condition is based on her actions, but it's not even actually her actions. It's actually my perception of her actions. Right? That's weak. Right? Now making a vow that says, you know what? If I think you're doing these things, then I will. Right? Like super, super weak. Right? Because you could totally pick up on a wrong cue. If that's the kind of commitment you make to your spouse, all of a sudden I find out Sheila's keeping a secret from me. Ooh, really? She's keeping secrets from me? What, is she cheating on me? What's going on? Oh, she's planning a birthday party, right? I can pick up on the wrong cues and completely go off the deep end, right? It's a horribly, horribly weak declaration. How should you make a declaration? Really simple. Based on what I know of you. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, from this day forward, I will. Right? And just like we mentioned before, there's a risk associated with that. The risk is that I could be taken advantage of because I'm making a declaration. If it doesn't get reciprocated, that's the risk. Right? How does that work between you and God? Not actually a huge risk because we know who God is. Right? Would you agree? But isn't this funny? Okay, let me paraphrase, just in really short version, I'll paraphrase those two vows before the Lord. Okay? One would be to say, Lord, I'm willing to commit my life to you, but kind of going to see how this goes. If I feel like you're honoring your end of the deal, then I'm going to live for you. How's that? What's one word that would describe that? Weak. But you could actually say a vow and say, you know what, Lord, I know who you are. You've revealed yourself to me in Scripture. You've revealed yourself to me through faithfulness to my forefathers. To me, in my life, I know who you are. And because I know who you are, Lord, I am going to declare today that I will, and then fill in the blank, right? Follow you, serve you, love you, passionately go after you, right? With all my heart, mind, soul, and strength. That's what I'm going to do today. What's the risk? Well, you're leaving it in God's hands. He's got to hold up his end of the bargain, right? But we actually know there's nothing that could ever give us doubt that he will do that, right? Except our own human weakness. Knowing these things, do you guys know which psalm we're reading today? Have you figured it out? Psalm 101. And I'm going to read it out of the NLT. Do we have any theologians or Bible translators in the room this morning? Perfect. Okay. And if whatever any Bible translators or such are listening to this online in some future year, 20 years from now, my apologies. Okay. Psalm 101, 1-8. This is written by King David, and it is full of I will statements. He is making declaration after declaration after declaration. And he says, I will sing of your love and justice, Lord. I will praise you with songs. I will be careful to live a blameless life. When will you come to help me? I will lead a life of integrity in my own home. I will refuse to look at anything vile and vulgar. I hate all who deal crookedly. I will have nothing to do with them. I will reject perverse ideas and stay away from every evil. I will not tolerate people who slander their neighbors. I will not endure conceit and pride. I will search for faithful people to be my companions. Only those who are above reproach will be allowed to serve me. I will not allow deceivers to serve in my house, and liars will not stay in my presence. My daily task will be to ferret out the wicked and free the city of the Lord from their grip. That's what King David writes, the whole psalm. Okay, you can look at it in your Bible, Psalm 101. Now we're going to break it down and think a little bit. What is David saying in that psalm? Would you agree with me that it's a psalm of declaration? It is. He's saying lots of I will statements, right? What's he saying? So, verse 1, he says, I will sing of your love and justice, Lord. I will praise you with songs. What's the declaration? Paraphrase it. What's that? He's going to love God. To what extreme? Here's what I love about David. Was his life super easy? No, he had lots of reasons, humanly speaking, he had lots of reasons to question God's timing. But he is declaring, I will sing of your love and justice. If we park on love for a second, David knows that God sees him. David knows that God knows what is happening in that moment and minute and second of his life. He knows that. He recognizes it, and he knows there's love there. David actually knows a personal relationship with God already in the Old Testament. And then at the same time, he's acknowledging that God is a God of justice. What does that mean? What does it mean to be just? It means that if a crime is committed, the punishment's going to fit, right? And if something good has been done, the reward will fit, right? Thank the Lord that he is full of love and justice, right? If it was only justice, it would be we'd be doomed, right? Thankfully, he's both love and justice, right? And David is acknowledging that. He's acknowledging God's character for who he is. So much so that it's actually impossible for God to not be just. Because justice is actually part of God's character. He can't be anything other than his character, right? It is actually who God is. And when David realizes who God is, that he is a God of love and a God of justice, what happens? It just explodes out of him, right? It spills out of him. He can't even contain it, and it spills into song, right? He's in love with the Lord. There is something. So in our marriage, Sheila is in the absence of one good thing because I'm not a singer, and I know my cousin, when he got married, it irritated me because he was singing to his bride as she walked down the aisle. And I'm like, oh goodness sakes. Right? Yeah, it's a romantic thing, and they're so in love with each other, they're singing to each other. Sheila can sing to me, I can't sing to her. I can just, I don't know, preach or something. Anyway. But there's something about singing that when you really love somebody, it actually just spills out of you, right? When you are excited about something and somebody, that's exactly what happens. That's what's happening to David. Let's go to verse 2. I will be careful to live a blameless life. When will you come to help me? I will lead a life of integrity in my own home. There's lots of statements in that verse. David sees the Lord. He wants to acknowledge the Lord for who he is. And as a result, he vows that I will live a blameless life. That's a bit of a high bar, right? He even takes it so far to say that I'm even going to live that life of integrity in my own home, right? This isn't just in front of people, not just at church, not just at work, in my own home. Would you agree that that's kind of where the rubber hits the road, right? If you're generally a pretty even keel guy and you don't lose your temper, where's a good chance you're going to lose your temper? At home, right? You get home from work, you've been a nice boy or a nice person all day, and you're frustrated, and now somebody, I don't know, left their toy there and you stub your toe, right? Or whatever is the case. Somehow those kinds of things, we get home, our guard comes down, and if we're not careful, that's where stuff hits the road. If you're tempted to look at things you shouldn't be looking at, where do you think you're going to be? Often, not always, but often, where are you tempted to do that? At home where no one's watching, right? Those kinds of things. If you're going to live a life of integrity in your own home where nobody else can see you, that's actually what integrity is all about. Being the same person at home when no one's watching except the Lord as you are when people are watching. That's integrity. David says, I'm going to be that guy. Also fascinating in this verse is that middle little line there where it says, when will you come to help me? It actually almost seems to me, when you read this psalm over and over, it almost seems to me like he slipped there for a second. He's saying, Lord, I love you. You're such a God of justice. I'm going to be integral. I'm just going to follow you with all my heart, mind, soul, and strength. And he's going, Lord, you're so good. And then he's all of a sudden like, when are you going to come help me? No, Lord, you are so good. He slips there for just a second. And you know what? Honestly, I love it. Because it shows me two things. A, it's real, right? And David's life wasn't smooth sailing. He is not able to say this psalm because his life was just, no problems. His life is full of problems. And in the midst of that, he is able to say, but I know who the Lord is, and on this day, from here on forward, this is how I'm going to live. Isn't that good? I love it. Verse 3, I will refuse to look at anything vile and vulgar. I hate all who deal crookedly. I will have nothing to do with them. I'm going to break this into two parts. I will refuse to look at anything vile and vulgar. Do you guys think, so David apparently lived in a time when he had a choice to not look at things that were vile and vulgar. I actually find that intriguing, because would you guys agree with me that we live in a day and age where it's pretty easy to look at things that are vile and vulgar? It's alarming, right? That's a statement. What does that mean? That is going to, if you make a vow like that to the Lord, wow, that is going to change your world. That's going to change whatever you set your eyes on. That's pretty tough. Right? It's going to change whatever you watch and whatever you see, right? And with those screens that we have in our world today, man, becomes a restrictive thing. Changes what kind of YouTube videos you watch, what kind of movies you watch, TV shows, right? That's where the eye gate is there. If you make that vow, I'm not going to put anything vile or vulgar in front of my eyes, that's a huge, huge statement. Probably even changes the way you focus your eyes when you check out and buy your Slurpee at 7-Eleven, right? That's what it means. That's what David is saying. I will not, Lord, set anything vile or vulgar before my eyes. That's a huge statement. Then we get into the second part of that verse. And I am going to confess some things to you guys here. I was frustrated this week because I was so sure that the Lord was asking me to preach about Psalm 101, and I was looking for a good translation to preach it out of. I was looking for the perfect translation. Okay? And I like reading in the NLT because it's easy to understand. I do. And it's actually not a paraphrase. It's an actual translation. I'm also very familiar with the NIV because that's what I grew up on, and I still often, when I do my Bible reading at home, I've got at least two versions open, and I like to compare them. In my computer program, I've got the ESV. I often go back to the ESV because it's more word for word, right? And you got all kinds of other things you can add into there. Whatever translation you're holding in your hand, very likely it's a reliable translation, okay? We have lots of reliable translations at our disposal, each one with a little bit different wordings, but they're reliable, okay? I'm reading this scripture and I'm like, I get to the second part of this verse, and the NLT says, I hate all who deal crookedly, I will have nothing to do with them. And I got a bit of a problem with that, because in my mind, that is clearly saying that I'm not having anything to do with evil people. Where the NIV says something, actually what I understand quite different. It says, I hate what faithless people do. I will have no part in it. What are they talking about there? Not the people, the sin, right? And I'm like, that makes more sense to me in the NIV. And the NLT seemed to, they saw it different, and then I opened as many translations, reliable translations as I could find, something like 10. Most of them have, actually everyone that I could find talks about along the lines of the NIV. Not wanting any part of the sin, but for whatever reason the NLT skews it. And I'm like, are they wrong? I'm still studying the NLT. It's good. I actually really like that translation. It's really, really good. I also like the NIV. But the NIV, ironically, the first part of the verse, they kind of got different. Instead of saying so clearly, I will not look at anything vile and vulgar, they throw in the word with approval in there. And I'm like, it just weakened the whole thing. And I don't even know which one of them is perfect. Which one of those translations? I was upset this week, and I'm like, Lord, what is the deal? These seem like they have conflicting messages, and yet they both clearly are portraying David's psalm to you, and he was praising you and declaring to follow you. What's going on? And I looked at the King James, the New King James, the ESV, New American Standard. I looked at all those. They're all kind of the same. How many of them are perfect? You tell me the answer. None of them. Now, what on earth is that pastor saying? The Bible's not perfect? The Bible is trustworthy. It is reliably. It is fully, fully true. From beginning to end, the Bible is 100% true. But perfection is actually only in Jesus. Because you have some translations that use really big words, and maybe those words are more accurate, but simple people like me can't understand them. Even the NLT. Do you guys know what the word ferret means? Raise your hand if you know what it means to ferret somebody out. We got one person. Okay, so I don't feel too bad. We're going to get to that in a minute. But I'm like, if the translation itself was perfect, then everybody from a 5-year-old to a 95-year-old with every level of education could understand it in today's terminology as well as 2,000 years ago terminology. That would be the perfect translation. And guess what? It doesn't exist. That kind of perfection is only going to be in Jesus, either at the second coming or in heaven. Okay? That's where perfection is, because in that moment, either when Jesus comes back or when we are in heaven, everybody will fully know who he is and have full understanding of how great he is. Does that make sense? Then we will clearly know, right? I hope that was clear and that you don't misunderstand what I'm saying. The Bible is all true. Do you guys get that? I hope that made sense. David is actually making a really big statement here in this verse, and he says, I refuse to look at anything vile and vulgar. And when it comes to the sin that I see around me of people who are not following the Lord, I actually think he's saying, Lord, I declare this day, I'm not going to have any part of that sin. And actually, if I was to paraphrase it, I would say that he doesn't want to get fooled into thinking that that sin is good. Do we not sometimes slip into that? We're like, oh man, I wish I wasn't a Christian because then I could go and do that. Right? Guess who's putting that lie in your head? Everything good comes from the Father, right? The Father in heaven, not the father of lies, right? And that's where David's going with this verse. Verse 4, he says, I will reject perverse ideas and I will stay away from every kind of evil. What kind of evil is he trying to stay away from? Everything, right? He's trying to stay away from lying and cheating and stealing and sexual immorality and greed and selfishness. He wants none of it. I want none of it, Lord. I want to serve you, and I will passionately pursue you. Verse 5, he makes that list pretty honed down. He said, I will not tolerate people who slander their neighbors. Isn't that good? Isn't that good? Why so quiet? That screen's not working. I will not endure conceit and pride. David is on a mission. He is full of passion and zeal. And I actually wonder, who do you think David fears more, man or God? God. And so we actually say he's got fear of the Lord, right? He's got a healthy fear of the Lord. He is hearing what guys are saying, what people are saying around him. He's hearing it. But he doesn't have fear of it. He has fear of the Lord, right? And so he's basing his decisions on what God thinks. And he's not tolerating people who slander their neighbors. What do you think that would, if you would take that kind of attitude, here comes you and King David, and you go into the coffee shop. How would that change? Would that be good? Can you imagine just declaring that to the Lord? Lord, I'm going in for breakfast this morning. I'm not going to tolerate any neighbors slandering each other. That'd be good. Because I fully believe, and I'll prove it to you in a minute, but David would not resist going into the coffee shop for breakfast. He would still go. But when he was there, he wouldn't tolerate slander. He would say, guys, quit it. Let's talk about something else. Right? What you're doing is wrong. Leviticus 19:17 says, rebuke your neighbor frankly so that you do not share in his guilt. And I wonder if David was thinking that when he made that declaration. Because that kind of a declaration leaves two options. One, you leave, right? Oh, you guys are slandering neighbors? Okay, well, then I have two options. One, I'm going to leave, or two, I'm just going to tell you to stop it. right? The Bible word for that would be rebuke, right? Okay? Even if you see that rebuke to these people would be done with gentleness and respect, which Peter talks about later, right? This is not a timid and shy psalm. That's a bit of a declaration saying, I will not tolerate that, right? David is taking his relationship with the Lord really seriously, with passion, with zeal, right? It's good. Verse 6, I will search for faithful people to be my companions. Only those who are above reproach will be allowed to serve me. David is looking for people in his life who he can follow their example. He's looking for mentors, right? He's looking for people who if he would end up becoming like them, would be a good thing, right? Those are the kind of people he wants in his life. Do you have people like that in your life? If you would become, I've sometimes heard this at leadership meetings, that you become like the 5 closest people that you're nearest, or the people that are the 5 most important people in your life, you become like them, right? If you did, would that be a good thing? Would that be a good thing between you and the Lord? David was on that trail. In verse 7, he says, I will not allow deceivers to serve in my house, and liars will not stay in my presence. David is not interested in tolerating some kind of half-hearted following of the Lord. He's in, right? Chips are on the table, I'm all in, right? That's the kind of relationship that he has with the Lord. But you know what's amazing to me about David? Just because he is like that, and he is all chips in, following the Lord with passion and with zeal, he is not somebody who is wearing a white robe with little tiny spectacle glasses halfway down his nose and, don't touch me, sinner, right? He's not one of those guys. Because you know who is attracted to David? Tell me about the kind of guys that were attracted to David. Not in a weird way, but like guys who would want to hang out with him, okay? Rebels, yeah, guys who are rough around the edges. 1 Samuel 22, I'm going to refer to 1 Samuel 22 and 1 Samuel 30. But in 22, 1-2, it describes those guys who wanted to go and hang out with David as people who were one of 3 things, either in trouble, in debt, or discontent. Right? These guys are rough around the edges, fighters. That's who, let's go hang out with David. Right? The man of God, the man after God's own heart. Right? In 1 Samuel 30, verse 22 refers to the same guys as troublemakers and guys who are evil hanging around with David. Right? 1 Samuel is an incredibly good example, okay? 1 Samuel 30. David, this will also give you a clue as to how easy his life is. He has left his home country and is now hiding in the enemy territory with the Philistines. Who is Goliath, by the way? A Philistine. Okay, so anyway, so David and his guys are now hiding in the Philistine territory. David and 599 or 600 of his closest friends, okay? All these rebels are hiding with the Philistines. And the Philistines go off to war. David and his guys are going to go join them. That makes the Philistines a little nervous, okay? For probably good reason, but they're about 3 days away from Ziklag, the city that they were just at, okay? The Philistines say, no, there's too many Philistines getting nervous here. You guys, we love you guys. Go back to Ziklag, okay? So they go back to Ziklag. What had happened to Ziklag while they were gone? Shout it out. What happened to that city? Yeah, it was raided. The Amalekites came, they plundered it, they took all the good stuff out of it, they kidnapped the women and children, and then they lit the whole city on fire, right? Destroyed it. David and his guys David and his 600 disorderly guys get back there. Now they're mad. Guess who they're mad at? David. They're thinking about stoning him, right? It's not working out well. If we keep on going through the story, they decide, they ask the Lord, do we go after these guys? The Lord says yes. So they go. But they have been traveling now something like 6 days. Right? 3 days out, 3 days back, whatever it is. They've been traveling a number of days. They're exhausted. 200 of the guys are too exhausted to continue, and so they stay put. David and 400, they plow ahead. They meet up with the Amalekites, lay an absolute licking on all those guys, right? Until that only very few of them escaped. The battle took an entire day. It's described very in detail in the Bible. And then they grab all that plunder. They did not miss one thing. Everything that was taken out of the city, plunder, sheep, whatever it was, cattle, money, silver, gold, and all the women and children, every one of them came back. Okay? They got him back. They come back and they meet these other 200 guys. And then what happened? Ooh. Now you got a disorderly mob here of 400 guys who just are splattered with blood and just had this incredible victory. And here's their 200 friends. What'd you guys do? We were just sitting here resting. And those 200 guys wanted some of their plunder. The 400 said, not a chance, right? We just went and did this all ourselves. You're not giving any of it to you. And you know what David did? This is how we know David, those kind of guys feel comfortable in his presence, and yet he does not back down. You know what he says to them? This is in 1 Samuel 30, 23 to 24. He says, no. He stands up to them and he says, guys, no. Everybody is getting their share. Every 600, doesn't matter if you're part of the 200 resting guys or the 400 guys who just fought and got that stuff back. Everybody's getting an equal share. In fact, it's not just for this time. I'm putting that into a permanent law for Israel for all time. He stood up to them and he said, and he acknowledged, right in that sentence, he said, because the Lord has given it to us. And it actually describes them as evil and troublemakers right there. And David is not scared of them. He stands up for them and says, not going to happen on my watch. It was a pleasure doing business with you guys, but we are giving this all, we're sharing this, right? And he talked openly about God to them and told them the truth. He was not afraid of them. He did not get their strength from them. Who did he get his strength from? The Lord. That's in the same chapter, 1 Samuel 30, verse 6. Right? That's where we're going in this psalm. David is, with passion and zeal, following the Lord, wants no evil to taint his life. But that doesn't stop him from being able to hang out with the rough around the edges. Right? I love that. Verse 8, my daily task will be to ferret out the wicked and free the city of the Lord from their grip. Okay, so I had one person who knows what ferret out the wicked means, or ferret out. Anybody want to take a stab at it? And I'm like, this is out of the NLT. I love the NLT. But I have no idea. I had to go to Merriam-Webster to find out what ferret means. Right? In my mind, it looks like a mink. Four-legged little hairy thing. Right? And my daily task, it actually means to actively seek out. Okay, could we not just say that? My daily task will be to actively seek out the wicked. That's what David is actually saying. And it's true, that's what he's saying. Right? He is looking to silence those around him who are promoting evil in his country. That's the kind of attitude that David has. He's full of passion and zeal. If you would describe David's attitude and relationship, attitude to the Lord, relationship with the Lord, if you would describe it as somebody being on a ship, what kind of ship would it be? A cruise ship? David is just kicking back in the hammock, having a snooze, on a lounger by the pool, while the world is going to hell. Is that a good description? You guys tell me, is that a good description? He's on a battleship, right? He's like, Lord, I'm excited. Let's take some territory, and if I'm not taking territory, then let me defend your territory, right? Whatever you said, let's do it, right? He's in. He says, I'm not going to tolerate this. I'm going to Lord, I'm going to actively every day defend your territory and take territory for you, Lord. He's not snoozing. And so, I looked at Psalm 101, and I'm like, what would that look like in my life? If I was to stand up today and say, you know what, I would love it if David could be here, and he could tell me if we're on the right track here. But according to how we understand Psalm 101, I think we're pretty close. So I'll go to that next slide and just paraphrase. Could I say something like this? Jesus, I will openly praise you and not be ashamed to thank you for your love and your justice. I will live a life of integrity and not cheat on you by looking at things I shouldn't. I won't be fooled into longing for the fun of sin. In fact, I will not sit quietly in the face of evil, but I will take a stand for what is right and not cave into peer pressure. Every day, I will be intentional about making you my top priority. Jesus, I will follow you for life. Right? So if you go back to the beginning of the sermon, you could say something really weak to the Lord like, well, if I think that you're holding up your end of the bargain and you keep on convincing me that I'm supposed to follow you, I guess I will. Right? That's horrible. Could you say something like this? And guys, you know what? I don't even know. That is not worded perfectly. You can renew your vow to the Lord every day. I'm just saying this is a good place to start, right? Tomorrow you can get up in the morning and say, Lord, it's Monday morning. Today I'm going to do it again, right? And you can reword it. But you can actually make it, if you're interested in doing and actually taking that stand, much like spouses take a stand on their wedding day or when they're renewing their vows. I am committed because I'm in a relationship with you, Jesus. I'm committed to carrying out my end of the deal. Jesus, I will openly praise you and not be ashamed to thank you for your love and your justice. I will live a life of integrity and not cheat on you by looking at things I shouldn't. I won't be fooled into longing for the fun of sin. In fact, I will not sit quietly in the face of evil, but I will take a stand for what is right and not cave into peer pressure. Every day I will be intentional about making you my top priority. Jesus, I will follow you for life. You guys interested in making that kind of a declaration this morning? I'm just going to say this, but I'm going to remind you of Deuteronomy 23, 21 to 23. Don't do it flippantly. Don't do it just because the guy beside you is going to stand up. But here's what I'm going to ask you to do. If you're interested in making that vow to the Lord right now, I'm going to invite you to stand up so that the Lord, the unseen world, can see that you mean it. And I'm going to read it, and at the end of that, you can say amen, because that's just going to be my closing prayer. So if you are interested in that, you can stand. If you are not interested, or you're worried about not wanting to make that vow, you stay sitting. That is between you and the Lord. But if you're interested, you can stand up. This is going to be my closing prayer for the end of this sermon. And this is how it goes. And if you agree, stand up, and at the end of it, we can say amen together. Jesus, I will openly praise you and not be ashamed to thank you for your love and your justice. I will live a life of integrity and not cheat on you by looking at things I shouldn't. I won't be fooled into longing for the fun of sin. In fact, I will not sit quietly in the face of evil, but I will take a stand for what is right and not cave into peer pressure. Every day, I will be intentional about making you my top priority. Jesus, I will follow you for life. And all the people said, amen.